They posted it and then they vanished. No profile, no trace. Just a chilling message left behind. This is LurmoStories. Real stories, real dread. Keep listening or risk becoming part of it.
They told me the evening shift at Briarview Mall was quiet, but that wasn't true. Quiet is peaceful. This place just held its breath. By the time the food court closed, the vendors shuttered their grills and the last customers dragged trays away. Something in the air changed, like the HVAC had stopped circulating and the whole space was listening. My job was simple: wipe down tables, empty bins, run the floor scrubber. I'd been doing it for 3 months when I noticed the pattern. All tables cleared easily, except one. The round laminate one pushed against the far corner near the abandoned smoothie kiosk. It never had people sitting there during the day, but every night after closing, crumbs and a half smear of grease would show up, like someone had eaten there after the place emptied out. The first night, I brushed it off. The second night, it bothered me. On the third, I asked my supervisor, Jerry, if someone stayed late without telling me. He snorted. "Nobody eats back there. That table's been tagged for removal for years. Just clean it and move on." I nodded, though it didn't feel right. The table wasn't old exactly, just scuffed, like it had been dragged from place to place. The laminate had faint rings, too many to count, all overlapping like someone set down wet cups in the exact same rhythm for years. Around 10 p.m., I finished the main section and made my way to the corner. The mall was closed. The escalators stopped. The silence thick enough to make my own footsteps sound wrong. I rounded the smoothie kiosk and saw it again. Fresh crumbs, some still soft under my glove. A napkin too, folded neatly in half. I checked behind the kiosk, the hall to the restrooms, even the service door. No one. That night, something new happened. As I wiped the surface, the table made a sound. Too light to be the laminate bending, too quick to be my cloth. A faint, deliberate tap from underneath, like a knuckle knocking once. I jerked my hand back. The scrubber hummed behind me, vibrating on the tile. I crouched, lifted the edge of the table skirt, and looked beneath. Nothing but shadow and metal legs. But the smell hit me. Warm, stale, unmistakably like the breath of someone who'd just been sitting there. I stood and backed away until my calves hit another chair. The table stayed perfectly still, crumbs shifting only where my rag had brushed them. But the air around it felt disturbed, as if someone had only just risen from the seat and slipped away a second too early. I reported nothing, just finished my shift. The next night, the table was worse. Not just crumbs, a full tray, empty, centered exactly in the middle. The tray wasn't from any vendor that was still open. It was the old style, white plastic with rounded corners, the kind they phased out before I even got hired. No one had any reason to bring one out of storage.
They'd all been tossed when the food court was renovated.
I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at it. The surface was clean, but the tray was warm. Not body warm, more like it had been washed in hot water minutes ago. I ran my thumb along the edge. Dry. No steam, no scent of detergent. I carried it to the dish return, set it on the rack, and heard someone behind me say, "Leave it." I spun so fast my ankle cracked. Jerry was standing where the corner opens up into the larger seating area, hands in his pockets, face pale like he hadn't meant to speak aloud. "You scared the hell out of me," I muttered. He didn't answer right away. He just watched me, watched the tray. "You shouldn't touch things from that table," he said. My chest tightened. "You told me it was just for removal." "Yeah, and it will be. Eventually." He swallowed, jaw tightening. "Just do your route and don't linger there. That part of the food court has bad circulation, messes with people." He left before I could ask more. The rest of the shift dragged. Every time the scrubber passed near that corner, the machine's motor dipped like it was straining. I avoided looking at the table, but I caught glimpses of it in the kiosk's glass. A dark, round shape sitting in a pocket of still air. When I was about to clock out, I checked the tray rack. The old tray was gone. I hadn't seen anyone take it. The following night, the lights above the corner table flickered. Not repeatedly, just once, a long, slow dim that made the shadows stretch out. I told myself it was a ballast issue, but the rest of the row stayed bright. As I approached, I felt the temperature drop. Not cold, just drained. The air lost all warmth, like that corner had been cut out of the mall and stored somewhere else. On the table sat something new, A foam cup, lid on, straw punctured through. No markings from any food vendor I recognized. I touched the cup. It was full. I shook it lightly and heard liquid slosh. A whisper traveled across the tile behind me. Not a voice, more like air squeezing through teeth. I turned, expecting someone from maintenance, but the food court was empty all the way to the arcade shutters. The cup trembled, not from my hand, I'd set it down. It trembled on its own, a tiny vibration working its way through the straw until it made a soft rattle against the lid. I backed away one step, then another. The straw went still. Then something tapped the underside of the table again, 2 short knocks. That sound wasn't like wood or laminate, it was like bone hitting metal. The knocks were soft, but they carried through the food court like the place had been built to amplify them. I felt the sound in my teeth more than in my ears. I should have walked away, clocked out, called in sick for the rest of the week. But the cup, it had shifted. Not far, just enough that the moisture ring beneath it no longer lined up. Someone, or something, had nudged it toward the seat. I forced myself closer, keeping my steps slow so they wouldn't echo. The table's laminate surface reflected the overhead lights in a warped oval. When I got close enough to see under the table again, I crouched. My hand shook, but I lifted the edge of the skirt with one finger. Feet. Not whole ones, just the impression of them, as if someone stood there a moment before, leaving heat-shaped silhouettes on the linoleum. They faded as I watched, dissolving like steam on glass. I shot upright, heart slamming against my ribs. The cup rattled again, but I didn't touch it this time. I grabbed my radio, thumb hovering over the call button. Before I pressed it, I heard a chair shift. One of the plastic chairs at the table dragged half an inch across the floor. Slow, deliberate, like someone pulling it out to sit. The legs made that horrible squeaking scrape, the kind you hear in empty cafeterias. "Hello?" My voice came out thin. No answer. No footsteps. Nothing. Then the chair moved again, just a small adjustment, and stopped. I radioed Jerry. He picked up on the second buzz. "You need to come to the food court," I whispered. "No," he said immediately. "Leave the lights on and go to the west exit. I'll meet you outside." "I'm not walking past it." "You don't have to. Just don't look at the table." I hung up. He wasn't coming in here. Whatever he knew, he didn't want eyes on it anymore. The lights above the corner dimmed again. This time they stayed low, shadows pooled under the table, darker than they should have been. The cup tipped slightly, like a hand had lifted it and set it back down without picking it up fully. The chair angled toward me. My whole body locked up. Something invisible sat there. I felt it, the same way you can tell when someone stands behind you, even if they're silent. The air pressed inward, thick and expectant. A second chair moved. Not pulled out, pushed in, hard enough that it bumped the table edge. Whatever sat there wanted the seat across from it filled. I didn't breathe, didn't move. I backed away inch by inch until the distance between us felt survivable. Then I turned and ran. I quit the next morning, gave no notice. Jerry didn't argue, just nodded like he'd been waiting for it. 3 days later, the mall announced renovations to the food court. Layout updates, they said, improved traffic flow. But when the photos went up online, I zoomed in. The tables were all new, sleek, modern, evenly spaced. Except one. In the far corner, barely visible, sat a round laminate table. The same scuffed surface, the same ghostly rings, the same chair angled slightly outward, waiting. They'd replaced everything around it, but not that table. I didn't plan on going that late. The DMV on Harlow Road closes at 7, and I walked in at 6:38 after sitting in traffic for nearly an hour. The place was nearly empty, just a middle-aged guy filling out paperwork and a woman behind the counter who looked like she'd already worked a double shift. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, that constant low buzz that somehow makes the air feel heavier. She glanced up when I stepped in. "Last renewal?" "Yeah, sorry, traffic." She didn't answer, just pushed a clipboard toward me and pointed at the plastic chairs. The other man didn't look up. He sat in the very last row of seats, farthest from the windows, tapping a pen against his knee in this slow, uneven rhythm. The sound kept drawing my attention. Tap, 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 long pause, tap. Like he wasn't thinking about it at all. I filled out the form and approached the counter. The woman typed my info with this slow, deliberate method, each key pressed harder than necessary. I could hear the metal plate under the keyboard flexing. When she asked me to stand for the photo, something felt off. The camera tripod had been moved way too close, practically touching my chest, and the backdrop behind it had a dark stain across the fabric, like someone tried to scrub it out but couldn't. Out of the corner of my eye, the man in the last row had stopped tapping. His head was tilted slightly toward us, but he still hadn't looked up. The photo flash didn't fire.
The woman checked the cable, adjusted the lens, tried again. Nothing.
"You'll need to wait a moment," she said, and walked through the employees-only door behind the counter without taking her keys or phone. I stood there, not sure whether to stay by the camera or return to the seats. The building felt too quiet now. That humming from the lights had softened, like someone turned down the voltage. When I finally looked back toward the seating area, the man in the last row wasn't tapping anymore. He was sitting perfectly still, like he was listening for something behind the walls. His hands were flat on his knees. His posture hadn't changed, but something about the way he held his shoulders made my skin crawl, like he'd been waiting for the room to empty. I checked the clock above the counter, 6:52. The employees-only door was still closed, and then the man finally spoke without lifting his head. "You shouldn't have come this late." I didn't answer him at first. I thought maybe he was talking on a headset or muttering to himself, but there was nothing in his ears, nothing in his hands. He kept staring at the floor, shoulders lifted just slightly, as if bracing for impact. "What do you mean?" I asked. His jaw moved like he had to remember how to speak. "They don't like when people come right before closing." I glanced toward the employees-only door, still shut. No footsteps, no voices. The air felt stale, like the AC had been turned off. My shirt stuck to my back. "Who's they?" I asked. He didn't turn his head, but his eyes shifted upward, meeting mine for a split second. They were bloodshot, so red it looked painful. But what unsettled me wasn't how tired he looked. It was how alert he suddenly seemed. Whatever fog he'd been under before had evaporated. "You'll see," he said quietly. Something clattered behind the door. Not metal, not a dropped tool. More like something pressing against a shelf, making it rattle. I waited for the clerk to come out, but the noise didn't repeat. The man stood up. It was slow, deliberate. He smoothed his shirt, straightened his spine. Once he stood fully, he looked entirely different, composed, even taller than I'd thought. He walked toward me with confident steps, stopping just shy of the camera tripod. "You still have time to leave," he said. "They don't lock the doors until 7. His tone wasn't threatening. It sounded resigned, like someone repeating instructions he'd been given too many times. "I just need my license renewed," I said, though my voice caught. He shook his head. "It's not worth it. Once they take your picture, they keep more than your face." Before I could respond, the lights flickered. Just once, but long enough for the room to fall into a gray dimness that made every shadow seem heavier. When they came back, the man's expression had tightened. "They're almost done back there," he whispered.
You can hear it when they move the walls.
A cold pressure settled at the base of my skull, the kind that comes right before panic takes over. I stepped back from the counter. "That's enough," I said. "I'm leaving." He didn't follow. He just watched me walk toward the glass doors at the entrance. But when I pushed on the metal bar, nothing budged. I tried again, harder. The mechanism didn't click, didn't shift, like the door wasn't even designed to open anymore. The man exhaled shakily behind me. "They lock early when someone new comes in," he said. "Means they picked you." The words didn't make sense. Picked me? For what? I shoved the door again, putting my shoulder into it. The metal didn't even shake. Behind me, the man's footsteps creaked across the tile. "You should step away from the entrance," he said quietly. "They don't like when people crowd it." I backed off, breathing hard. The room felt warmer now, as if someone had turned on a heater I couldn't see. My ears buzzed. The fluorescent lights were dimming again, but this time they didn't come back full strength. They settled into a sickly, uneven glow. "What do they want?" I asked. He stopped beside the camera. "To finish processing," he said. "It's what they do." The employees-only door clicked, very slowly. Not a human pace, more like someone dragging something heavy just inches at a time. A thin line of fluorescent light appeared at the base of the door as it opened, but no one stepped out. Instead, the air changed. It shifted the same way it does before a thunderstorm, pressure rising, static creeping across your skin. The man lowered his head immediately, like he'd done this before. "You need to stand still," he whispered. they're going to try the picture again. No, I said, I'm not doing this. He didn't argue. He just stared straight ahead, hands at his sides, breathing through his nose in short, controlled bursts. He looked terrified in a way that didn't involve shaking or screaming, more like someone accepting gravity. A shape moved behind the door, not stepping out, simply passing behind the narrow opening. Too tall to be the clerk, too quiet. Then the tripod camera whirred on by itself. The lens rotated toward me. The flash casing clicked. Something inside the machine hummed, a deeper, low-frequency vibration that didn't belong in anything portable. My legs turned stiff. It felt like that hum was inside my bones. "Look at it," the man murmured. "If you don't, it takes longer." I stayed frozen. The door behind the counter opened just a little wider, as if encouraged by my hesitation. A hand, gray, thin, wrong, gripped the edge from the inside. I forced air into my lungs and turned toward the man. "Did they take your picture?" I asked. He nodded once. "That's why I'm still here." The hum deepened. My vision shook around the edges. The camera's flash charged with a rising whine, and the hand on the door slid further out, fingers stretching toward the counter. I felt something give way inside me. Not courage, not surrender, just a simple calculation. Staying meant ending up like him. I lunged for the camera and knocked the tripod over. The flash fired mid-fall, bursting against the floor with a sound like tearing fabric. The hum cut off instantly. The lights above us surged bright white, then snapped to darkness. The man screamed, not from pain, but from pure despair. In that second of total black, I didn't hear the hand retreat. I didn't hear anything retreat. I heard it move into the room, somewhere behind me. When the emergency lights flickered on, the man was gone. The employee's only door hung open to an empty, silent hallway. The air was normal again. Too normal. The front door opened easily when I tried it. Outside, traffic moved. People walked by. Everything looked untouched. My renewed license arrived in the mail 2 days later. The photo isn't me.
I'm writing this as a technician note because that's what we're supposed to do when a chain of custody record doesn't match the intake logs. Officially, anyway. Unofficially, I just need to get it out of my head. The State Conservation Laboratory in Madison isn't the kind of place that deals with anything dramatic. We stabilize waterlogged timbers, freeze-dry old textiles, patch together ceramics pulled from construction sites. Everything comes with a form, a barcode, a signature. No exceptions. So when I came in Monday morning and saw a stainless steel specimen carrier sitting on my workstation, sealed, untagged, droplets of melted ice pooling underneath, I assumed someone from night shift misdelivered something. There was a faint smell to it, like damp stone after a storm, but sharper. Not rotten, just mineral and wrong. I checked the intake board. Nothing. Checked the drop safe. Empty. Checked the overnight log. No entries. The night tech, Murphy, hadn't left a note, which was weird. He writes one for everything, even when a client forgets to initial a form. I carried the container to the sink and ran my gloves over the lid seams. No tape, no tampering marks. Just a lab standard latch, but engraved with a number sequence I didn't recognize. 7 digits, no prefix, no agency code. My badge scanner didn't ping it as state inventory. When I cracked the lid, the cold hit first, then a soft metallic clink. Inside, cushioned in frost-stiffened foam, was a glass vial the size of my thumb. There was a smear of condensation on the inside of the glass, but no label. The contents looked like compacted soil, dark and fine, almost like powdered charcoal. But something in it caught the light. Tiny reflective grains, shifting color in a way that didn't match the angle of the lamp. I tapped the vial lightly against the foam. The grains stirred, but not like loose sediment, more like the movement had traveled through the whole mass at once, a slow ripple that settled too neatly. I went to log it as unknown sample, intake error, but the database froze when I entered the 7-digit engraving. Full lock. The cursor hung. Then the screen flickered and dumped me back to the desktop. No crash report. I tried again with a dummy barcode. This time, the system accepted it, but the sample field auto-filled with a location code. Origin, section 34B. We don't have sections labeled with numbers. Our storage rooms are named after fauna. Osprey, lynx, elk. I clicked the location field. It blinked once, then grayed out. Uneditable. While I was staring at it, Murphy walked into the lab, face pale and eyes unfocused like he hadn't slept. He didn't even say hi, just scanned the room until he saw the vial sitting in its foam cradle. His voice cracked when he asked, "Who opened it?" I told him I had, that it was on my station. I asked where it came from.
He looked at the vial the way someone looks at a spider on their pillow. Quiet, contained, panic. "It wasn't supposed to follow me here," he said. "I left it where we found it." I asked where that was. He swallowed hard, lips tightening. That part wasn't on a map. Before I could press him, something in the vial shifted again on its own. Not from vibration, not from handling. A smooth, rolling pulse through the dark material, as if responding to the sound of our voices. Murphy backed away, and the sample rose a millimeter inside the glass, like it was leaning toward him. Murphy wouldn't come closer to the workstation. He kept shaking his head, palms pressed to his temples like he was fighting off a migraine. The vial settled back into stillness, but the air in the lab felt different, drier, thin like high altitude. I told him to sit down. He just stared at the vial and whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the carrier. They don't want it moved." I asked who they were. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded slip of printer paper. It was damp and creased, edges torn like he had tried to get rid of it more than once. Only 3 words were written on it, slanted hard to the right, as if scribbled in a moving vehicle. "Do not return." I thought it was some kind of joke. Murphy was known for practical humor when he wasn't exhausted, but his expression didn't fit. His eyes had that glassy look people get after a car accident, the kind where nobody gets hurt, but the mind doesn't catch up right away. Before I could ask anything else, the overhead ventilation fans kicked on. Normally, they hum steadily, but this time there was a metallic rattle, like something scraping inside the duct. The pressure differential made one of the drying chamber doors swing half open. Murphy flinched hard enough that he knocked into a cart. The vial responded again. This time, the dark powder rippled in a tight, circular motion, like a miniature whirlpool spinning without water. The reflective grains flashed in rhythm with the ventilation noise, almost syncing with it. When the rattling rose, the swirling sped up. When it dipped, the motion slowed. Murphy whispered, "It's listening." That was enough for me to grab the vial with forceps and place it inside a secondary containment box. I sealed the lid, twisted the lock, snapped on 2 bands of tape. Even through the plastic, the swirl continued, faint but unmistakable. I walked it straight to the quarantine freezer down the hall. The freezer has a thick rubber gasket and a steel latch. You could store a radioactive beetle in there and nobody would complain. I opened the door, expecting the familiar jet of cold air, but the light inside flickered twice before stabilizing. I set the containment box on the second shelf. When I did, the swirling stopped abruptly, like a switch flipped off. The powder collapsed into stillness. No pulses, no glow. Murphy had followed me, but he stayed in the doorway, not crossing the threshold. His voice dropped to barely audible. "That place we surveyed, there wasn't supposed to be anything buried there. No record, no markers. Soil layers were wrong, too clean, like the ground had been replaced." I asked what he meant by replaced. He hugged his arms tight. "We dug a test core, just one, and whatever was in that layer wasn't soil. It came up in a perfect column, no crumble, like it wanted to stay together. We capped it, and I told them to leave it for the state geologist. But we kept hearing things that weren't echoes, soft movement, from below." He paused. "I put the sample back. I swear I did." The freezer light flickered again, harder. Then the steel latch on the door tremored under my hand, as if something inside shifted pressure against it. I pressed the latch firmly closed. When we stepped into the hallway, Murphy looked back once, then muttered, "You should log your last actions. Accuracy matters. If this follows the same pattern, they'll compare later." I asked what pattern. He didn't answer. He just walked out, shoulders hunched, leaving muddy footprints that weren't there when he entered. I turned back toward the freezer. The gasket along the edge bulged for a moment, like air was pushing outward from inside. Except the seal was perfect, and freezers don't exhale. I went back to my station to finish the quarantine report, but the terminal wouldn't load the form. The cursor blinked once, froze, then the screen filled with a single line of text. Section 34B, Access Verified. I tried to close it. The window regenerated instantly. The lab's network isn't supposed to allow external commands. Everything is air-gapped except the printer. But the keyboard felt dead, like input wasn't being accepted anymore. When the ventilation kicked on again, the rattle in the ductwork traveled along the ceiling, slow and pulsed, like something dragging metal across metal. Dust sifted from the vents. The lights dimmed, then steadied. I glanced toward the hallway. The freezer door stood open. Not wide, just a few inches.
enough for the warm lab air to roll in and fog the threshold. My first thought was that Murphy had come back, but the lab was silent. No footsteps, no carts, no doors. I stepped toward the freezer, each tile under my shoes echoing louder than it should have. The air near the door felt colder than the freezer itself, like the temperature was being pulled outward. The containment box was still on the shelf, but the lid was slightly askew. The locking dial rotated a quarter turn from where I'd left it. That specific dial can't shift unless someone applies pressure to lift and twist together. Even temperature change won't budge it. Inside the box, the vial lay on its side, faint crystals of frost blooming on the glass. The powder wasn't still anymore. It had formed a narrow ridge, angled toward the open door, like it had traced something. Behind me, a sharp crack echoed through the hall. I spun around. The polished concrete floor had a thin fissure running across it, stretching from the threshold toward the central sink. Another crack formed, bisecting the first, edges clean as if cut with a blade. Concrete doesn't fracture that neatly. A shape, no larger than the vial itself, shifted beneath the forming cracks, pressing upward just enough to bow the lines. Not breaking through, just tracking movement under the surface. I grabbed the containment box, slammed the lid, twisted the lock fully until my wrist ached. When I lifted it, the weight felt wrong, slightly heavier, like something inside had absorbed moisture or grown denser. I didn't look. I carried it to the evidence safe. The keypad beeped as I entered the code, but instead of unlocking, every light on the panel flashed in sequence. Behind me, the fissure in the concrete spidered outward, branching into smaller veins that crept toward my feet. The ventilation rattle stopped suddenly. A silence fell so complete I could hear the compressor inside the freezer slowing, as if the power feeding it was thinning out. I backed away from the spreading cracks, keeping the box close to my chest. The powder inside stirred once, just a pulse, barely a shift, but clearly deliberate. Not random vibration, not airflow. A low tone chimed from my workstation. The terminal had rebooted itself. Lines of text scrolled slowly, each one stamped with a time code. I recognized the format: automated audit logs, the kind we generate only during incident reviews. But every timestamp was from tomorrow. At the bottom of the screen, the newest line shifted into focus. Final location recorded. Section 34B. Entry complete. The cracks in the floor stopped spreading all at once, as if a signal had reached them. The powder inside the box quieted. Even the air seemed to settle back into place. I put the containment box on the floor. The weight of it pressed faintly against the tiles, aligning with the last small fissure beneath. I didn't open it again. I didn't move it. There was nothing else to do. Today, the maintenance crew cordoned off the hallway. They said a groundwater shift caused the fractures. The freezer was removed for electrical evaluation. My workstation was reassigned. But the box is still there, marked incorrectly as geological samples. No one questioned it. And every 12 hours, the lab registers a brief pressure fluctuation along the floor sensors, always centered on the same spot, always growing by a fraction of an inch. They'll chart it soon. They'll compare it with whatever report populates tomorrow. But I already know the result. Section 34B isn't part of this building. Not yet.
The stories may be over, but the fear isn't. Every corner of the internet holds another chilling tale, and you've just heard a few. Keep following LurmoStories. The next one is already waiting for you.